You're tuning in to the Black Hollywood Live Network, featuring news, interviews, and commentary on all things Black Hollywood. Hollywood redefined. From Los Angeles, California, streaming live thanks to Akamai Technologies. This is Black Hollywood Live. Justice is served. Featuring the week's roundup and commentary on legal news. Black Hollywood Live. Hollywood redefined.
You're listening to Black Hollywood Live.
And now, the host for Black Hollywood Live, Justice is Served.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of Justice is Served. I am your host, Chelsea Galicia, a workers' compensation attorney from right here in LA, joined by my usual suspect co-hosts, Shaka Strong. I always call you by your Twitter handle, Shaka Smith, who you can find at Shaka Strong, and BJ Abron, who you can find at justbjabron.com. Wow, now I turned you into a website. Jeez. All right.
I might start that.
Okay, you should. All right. So I am so glad that everybody is back. Just if this is your first time joining us, I guess a little background on all of us. Shaka comes from Miami, went to Princeton, undergrad in D.C., and then moved
Law school in D.C.
Law school in D.C., and then moved out to L.A. to pursue acting and fitness modeling, but always loves to go back to his legal roots and give you his analysis and perspectives on the issues of the week. And then BJ is a fresh member of the California bar, who passed bar just last year. I can't believe I'm saying last year already.
It went by so fast.
Yeah. Here from LA, Compton specifically, and has got some background in the public defender's office and business and legal affairs at BET. Shaka's done natural gas, healthcare, so we got a really good wide variety of perspectives and backgrounds here to give you what we think are the stories in the news from this past week that you should know about. And we're going to give you our legal thoughts and sometimes personal opinions.
A lot of the time, personal opinions.
On these stories. And so we have to start with what has to be the biggest news. And it's not immediately apparent that this is legal, but it's very legal to me, and that's the Flint, Michigan water crisis. We don't really talk about water issues here very much, but this is a crisis of pretty epic proportions. So here's what happened. The residents of Flint, Michigan have been literally poisoned by the tap water because there's lead in it. Lead is a neurotoxin. It causes irreversible damage, neurological damage, causes problems mostly in children, behavior problems, learning disabilities, and there is no cure. There's no way to reverse this. And the residents of Flint, Michigan, who are close to about 100,000 people, have been drinking this water and bathing in this water for a couple of years, even after there were clear signs that something was wrong with this water. So let's back up a little bit and explain first how we got here. Who can break down sort of the timeline of how this happened?
I mean, like you said, first of all, this is a travesty, and it's something that we hate to see happen in any place in the world. But the way that this got here is that back in 2013, they decided to make a move and a change from their water supply from Detroit Department of Water and Sewage over to a different one, I believe. And then at that time, it was like I think it was a moment in between in which they had to supply their own water source, right?
So basically, long story short, the water supply was changed by choice over from a clean lake to Flint River.
To their own, and it was actually celebrated as, actually using their own drinking water, which they hadn't done for several years.
The real reason behind this, and this is not a political interpretation, this was known to be the reason, was to save money.
Yeah.
And they saved $15 million, which that number will pale in comparison to the numbers that we're going to give you when we tell you sort of the damage that's estimated to be done. So they switched the water supply source in the hopes of saving money.
Yeah. And that's when everything kind of changed.
And then immediately,
and the problem is that the Flint River is corrosive.
Yeah.
So there's things in it that are corrosive to pipes.
Right.
And in Flint, as in a lot of American cities, there's lead in the pipes.
Yeah.
So when you have a knowingly corrosive water going through these pipes. It's going to pick up the lead that's in the pipes and deliver them to unsuspecting residents who are assuming that their tap water is safe to drink and cook with and bathe in.
And we know shortly thereafter, even some of the water color had changed, but the town had told the citizens, no problems, no worries, you're fine to continue.
In between that time and today, there were a number of incidents that took place in which allowed Michigan a chance to actually rectify the problem. There were people who reported the incidents of them feeling ill. There were, in fact, General Motors in 2013, they pulled out and said that they weren't going to use the water
because
supplies.
The water was corroding the metal in the car parts.
Not human flesh, we're talking metal. So yeah, there was a lot. There were tests done because people looked at it and it looked funny, smelled funny, tasted funny. There were tests. The EPA eventually said there was something wrong.
And even the doctors said some of the kids had higher amounts of lead during a particular period, and they chalked it up to seasonal high lead.
Oh my God, this is so infuriating. So it took finally like years, and then for some reason somebody believed one pediatrician who came forward to say that our kids were being poisoned. And I say our because I think any child in America, I think in the world, I call it ours.
When it comes to water, absolutely.
And so then it was pretty well known for a couple of months, and even still, the governor was not taking this as seriously as people think he should have for months. And so now is the question, did anybody commit a crime? I'm going to jump in first and say I think yes. I think the governor, Rick Snyder, committed a crime in deciding to switch the water source, not doing sufficient testing when they first decided to make the switch, not doing sufficient testing or overseeing the testing agencies, because there were state agencies that failed also. The environmental quality control people who are supposed to test this water that didn't do a great job of it. But he's their boss ultimately, and didn't find
and
this.
there was no enforcement actions of the EPA's findings.
Right. So for me, this seems clear to me that this governor committed a crime, derelict of duty, negligence that rises to a criminal degree.
Well,
Anybody agree with me?
I do agree. I won't say it's as clear as maybe you may make it seem, but I agree. I think that some type of criminal prosecution should take place
What
here.
do you think for?
What we're looking at is gross negligence here. When you're at a capacity, and a lot of viewers might not be aware that you don't have to affirmatively make an act or engage in an act to commit a crime. You can a failure to commit an act or to engage in an act could also constitute a crime as well. And so when you're in a position as a governor or in any position similar to that, you have a duty to act in certain ways at certain given times. And here, there were multiple circumstances and failures on his behalf, and where he could, like I said, he could have rectified the situation and stopped it, and every single time they chose not to.
Shaka, what do you think?
Well, I was happy to see Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton coming together and calling out Michigan.
I'm gonna clarify this statement. They didn't exactly come together and hold hands about this.
No. They didn't issue any joint statement of any sort, but it was good to see they were on the same page. Sanders calling for the governor's resignation, Hillary Clinton offering her support down in Michigan. And I think that's important. I think it offered it underscored the importance of what's happening there. We already had Katrina with George W. Bush in a very slow FEMA response. And I think
Did Donald Trump lend out a hand by any chance? Just a question.
As of right now, I do. I have no evidence.
I think he was too busy today getting endorsed by Sarah Palin.
Oh, right.
But I think it underscores what's going on in Flint. And something Hillary said was, would this be happening if the racial makeup of the town?
I don't want to give Hillary all that much credit because many people have brought this up.
Well, yes, of course.
The residents of Flint, Michigan, are 60% black, and this area has been struck by a lot of economic poverty because this was the original home of GM, and when the auto industry declined, cities like Flint were hit the hardest.
So yeah, would this be the same if the residents were of a different racial makeup?
I think it wouldn't be the same, to be honest, because you can look at other catastrophic incidents, and as far as I'm concerned, this would constitute a catastrophic incident. Now, the one that I'm going to bring up is Katrina. Obviously, that's a little different because it's a natural disaster, but in terms of preventative maintenance and preventing something from occurring, you've seen with Hurricane Katrina, the way the government acted was not the way that they should have. It was a lot of things that they could have done differently, but in other instances where there were catastrophic hurricanes in different areas where it was more populated with white individuals, they took a lot different approaches here.
And I feel like this is almost further than Katrina, because Katrina was a natural disaster.
Yeah.
For years, you're having testing that's showing you this thing is bad, you know?
Right.
So you didn't have the preparation necessarily, but with this,
But the correlation is the ability to limit the damage.
Yeah, this is even worse.
That's what we're talking about, limiting the
worse than
damage.
Katrina to me, as far as I'm concerned.
I think so too.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think he should be arrested. I think there should be voters should do a recall. I doubt it will happen that the legislature will impeach him. But
They may. This is
I don't
huge,
understand if this is not a failure warranting somebody being fired or having to resign. What is?
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of people are like, well, we don't have time for that right now. We just need to help the residents. But it's so
Something has to be done.
patronizing.
Something has to be done.
And one of the things that made me so kind of furious about that article where we saw about Hillary and Bernie's response to this is that the author of the article was saying, well, Hillary offered to help and wasn't as focused as Bernie was on removing Snyder as the governor, and that somehow just offering to help is the better answer. There are many people offering to help. I think what should be done is you've got to create a vacuum for good people to come in by getting out the incompetent people who don't care about the residents. So today the governor gave his state of the state address and spent most of the time talking about this problem. He admitted that he let his residents down. He was sorry, but he's not going to resign. At least that's what he says.
These are medical issues. It's not just letting
I mean,
people
you're talking
down.
about a generation of people who could be lost because of this type
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So, and also, this governor wants Obama to declare a state of emergency because, well, Obama's already declared a state of emergency, and that allowed the state to have like $5 million. But now he wants a different sort of state of emergency declared. I can't remember exactly what it's called right now, but one that's like a next level up that would entitle the state to like $95 million.
wow.
And Snyder said that he thinks that it's going to have they're going to need $95 million over a year to help the residents. As of now, he's put in $28 million. National Guard has come in to help pass out filters and things like that. So the cost of this crisis
far dwarfs the savings they had. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Who was the genius? And the funny thing is that this governor, when touted himself as like a nerd, where was he crunching these numbers about what kind of disaster we'd face?
And they had the reports very, very early on where this would not have had to go too far, and so that's what's really troubling about this.
And now all the plumbing for schools, the schools, which by the way, 80% of them in the Detroit area are not open because teachers are not showing up to work as an expression of there's not enough funding at our schools and we can't operate this way. And this is the reason why President Obama is in the Detroit area today. He was also there to talk about the auto industry and actually how well that it's done, that they've paid off the loans that they got from TARP.
But I think this is a classic example of just how far things can extend with like a disenfranchised minority. Because you're looking at people of a lower socioeconomic status, and now not only are they getting sick, now they can't go to school. So there's getting
a trickle down effect.
You're just getting pushed and pushed and pushed. Education now is going to suffer for these individuals, whether or not they're actually are able to live a natural, normal life. So
I agree.
Oh man, I hope that this is not the last that we hear of this story from a legal perspective.
I'm certain. I feel like there will be charges at some point during this crisis.
I hope to God that they would be unbelievable, unprecedented, I think, in my lifetime that somebody would actually be held accountable in that way, which is so funny because Governor Snyder's like, somebody needs to be accountable, somebody needs to be transparent, and I'm like, yeah, dude. Yeah. I don't understand how, I don't know if it's just like crazy ego narcissism that he's like, I effed up really badly, but I'm going to fix it. No, dude, I don't trust you to fix it. Why would I trust you to fix
At
it if
this
you're
stage,
the brainiac that came up with this solution to, $15 million of savings? Anyways, I'm going to stop before I could go on for way too long, but we will come back to it when it comes back in the news.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, I am going to change things way up for a moment and give you a word from our sponsors that make this show free for all of you. So we are bringing back our DraftKings. Good news, football fans. The playoffs are underway, and the big game will be here before you know it, specifically in 2 weeks by now, this big game, Super Bowl?
Yeah.
All right, the bad news is that when it's all said and done, another long, dark off season awaits. Cue sad music. Thankfully, our friends at DraftKings.com have fantasy football contests running through the conference championship games. So you can still play to win cash prizes this weekend and head into the off season as a fantasy football champion.
And
Shaka,
it's big
there's still...
for those of you who actually, I won one of my fantasy leagues.
Oh, wonderful.
So I'm good in that realm. But for you, those of you who actually lost,
Yeah.
there's still definitely a chance to win big.
I'm throwing my hat in the ring this week.
Right.
So, yeah.
All right,
There you
great.
go.
So to do that, you just pick your players, stay under the salary cap, and you could be on your way to victory. Renew old rivalries or create new ones by going head-to-head with friends, coworkers, and fantasy players from all over the nation. Your season-long fantasy football league is over, but the excitement continues with one-week contests this weekend at DraftKings. This is the last time you can play fantasy football until next season, so make it count. This isn't fantasy as usual. This is DraftKings. Welcome to the big time. Hurry to DraftKings.com now, and you're going to enter the promo code GEEK, G-E-E-K, and play for free with your first deposit. You could take home the top prize along with a lifetime of bragging rights. Yeah, it's probably worth more than the money, right?
Definitely.
So enter Geek
Well, I don't know.
for
That
free
money gets
entry.
really long.
Yeah, that's
Enter Geek for free entry now only at DraftKings.com. That's DraftKings.com. All right, thank you so much, DraftKings, and good luck to all of you in the last few weeks we have remaining in this season. There's still hope for Shaka.
Get this money.
Okay. All right. So this is, such a weird thing, but there's this race for inclusivity, and it's not from African Americans or Latinos or Asians or any of the usual minorities that we think of. We are seeing the rise of white student unions in this race for inclusivity, mostly on college campuses. Shaka, what is this about?
Well, I guess I think it kind of came about largely in response to Black Lives Matter, and a lot of these Facebook groups are popping up. Some are actually trying to formulate white student unions at their universities, and I believe it's been done at 1 or 2 universities. But there's been a lot of Facebook pages that are white student unions, and they've been trolling some of the Black Lives Matter groups and what they're doing. But it's become a debate that people are actually having in college classrooms, whether or not white student unions should be allowed. If they have black student unions, shouldn't white student unions be allowed? And it's something I've heard, even in college. Why are black people allowed to coalesce around this sort of group that's about race, whereas if a white student doesn't, there seems to be a double standard?
Well, to me, it's pretty obvious because you can, but why would you need to do that?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and that's the question. Is you have to step back a second and ask, why are these black students actually congregating together?
Exactly.
Yeah, so clearly there is nothing that anybody can do to stop these white student unions from forming. We have freedom of assembly and speech, all that kind of stuff that protects their right to do it. But why? I can't see what's a good reason.
What are you talking about? Let's protect our dominance?
Well, their concern is that over the next 30 years, white Anglo-Saxon Americans will be the minority in this country. And so I think they see it as a preventative measure that they can get together now and get their voices heard.
Well, they're becoming a minority as we speak today, but when you look at that's in general. When you're talking about population, when you start talking about finances or where you are economically, where you're talking about percentage of white people in colleges, those demographics look completely different. They still look the same.
And I think you touched on the last part. This is in colleges, and colleges are predominantly white, and so I think historically the reason you had black student unions forming or these groups was because of the history of this country. You had race riots. You had black people getting, hosed down in the streets and on college campuses. They were intimidated and beaten. And so these unions were a way for them to remain close and protected from physical harm when it was happening in the most extreme circumstances. Yeah. And now they're continued to be formed to make sure that they have a voice on these college campuses where you have a majority of a white population, but you have things that tend to disenfranchise black students, and they're excluded from the table when it comes to other community organizations on campus, whether it's anything that is coming top down in that sense, where they have felt that they have been disenfranchised. Yeah. And so I think that's where these unions have been born out of, and to now have a corollary of a white student union where they're not facing those issues, it seems to me.
And some people are doing it as a slap in the face. Like you mentioned a Facebook thing, and I had read something before that stated that a lot of the Facebook pages that were developed, nobody had a name on it. You couldn't identify who opened it at all. And so someone was just opening this up just to open it up. It's kind of like those people where you have a Black Lives Matter movement and someone that comes out and says, all lives matter. Yeah.
I mean, the only thing that will stop these groups will be if they cross the line and go over into hate speech, which could happen, as it's being said that some of these groups are sort of sponsored by white supremacist groups.
And then if we see a lot of the Black Lives Matter people and a lot of the students just on college campuses they've been protesting, wearing some of the Facebook comments of a lot of these white student unions that have been posted.
And that goes back to, I think we had a discussion before about whether I think someone was going to publish on billboards statements over the internet, right?
And that was I believe it was in Brazil, but now we have them doing it here. And I think it's such a good idea because a lot of people do feel safe behind a computer to be as racist or derogatory as they want. And we have to look, if the white student unions are making a movement that is positive and based in some positivity, maybe that'll be something to look at ongoing. But right now, they're a very retaliatory response that is very negative.
Exactly. That's what it is. And see, when I think the black organizations developed or organized, it was for, like you stated, it was for a particular reason. It was because of discrimination. It wasn't because we want to organize or because we want to dominate over you
the idea
or keep you from,
that they want to unionize or come together because they're going to be a minority soon just proves that they know how shitty minorities have it in this country, and they fear becoming a minority who's not heard and who's not given the same opportunities and who's ostracized or left to the peripheral. And so they're like, well, shoot, the way that we have been treating these people is about to come back and bite us when the demographics switch. So why don't they just clean up their act now, treat everybody equally so that when the demographics switch, everybody's equal anyway. I mean, I don't know.
Some people and when I say this, I don't mean all white people. I just mean a certain amount. And of course, this is not just white people. It's in every race. But some people can't fathom true equality amongst everyone. And they just can't.
And when we talk about, I think it's been very highlighted over the last few years, especially with the economic downturn, how much power that 1% has, how much money they control.
You're talking about the top 1%, the richest Americans.
And that 1% is what, 99% white,
Yeah.
So when you talk about power, just being a minority doesn't necessarily mean that you're without power.
Right, because look at that minority.
Exactly. That's not a disenfranchised minority, and that's the difference.
Exactly.
Right. Okay, well, so I'm all for freedom of expression and stuff, but please, I hope these people, behave not only legally, but civilly. All right.
Very important.
So now on to an abortion issue in front of the Supreme Court. And when I first read this, I was like, really? We're talking about abortion? Has this not been settled already? I was realizing, adding up the years, Roe v. Wade in 1973, the Supreme Court case that made legal abortion constitutional, is 40 some odd years old now.
Yeah, absolutely crazy.
And there's still states that are trying to reverse it or chip away at it. And Arkansas is one of those states. They have tried to, they did, I believe, put into effect a law that made it illegal to have an abortion after 12 weeks. And then what happened from there?
So, well, initially when I heard this story, I was like, how is it still an issue? It seems like it was a well-settled law. But what Roe v. Wade stated was that you can have an abortion before the date it's viable.
Right. So viability meaning like when it's like really this baby could live an independent life of its
on
mother.
Its own, yeah. And different people have come out to say it's anywhere between 21 to 26 weeks. And of course, Arkansas used someone that said it was 12 weeks. At 12 weeks, I believe, they'd established the baby can feel pain. I
think I heard that that's at 20 weeks. I have no idea why 12, but that's,
I think it was a different standard. It might have been the heartbeat standard where they said,
That's the
yes.
heartbeat.
They could
The
detect the
heartbeat is
heartbeat.
at 12 weeks, right?
Okay, they could detect the heartbeat.
That's what Arkansas was pushing.
And so that's what Arkansas decided to push for, thinking we could make a case that that heartbeat also means viability. And of course, the Supreme Court rejected that. And so I think what people don't realize is that though Roe v. Wade made abortion legal, there were ways for states to then kind of limit that scope.
Right.
And so states are free to regulate abortion.
Yeah, you can regulate it.
And regulating abortion is where I think the states have gone to in order to try to stop it.
And that's the reason why when you hear abortion, that's the reason why you still hear it today.
Yeah.
It's because Roe v. Wade did not say that abortion is legal 100%.
Yeah.
You can regulate only before a certain point, though.
Yeah, and it should be regulated, but when do they overreach and it's no longer regulation? It's just like
That's the undue
yeah,
burden
it's
test.
abstention,
Yeah.
really.
all right. So why are we talking about it this week?
Well, of course, because of Arkansas. So Arkansas, the Supreme Court said, that law does not stand, and so
So the Supreme Court just announced that we're not going to hear the case that would allow this bill or this law to be in effect. It came out of was this the whole
there was an appeals court.
The whole women's health case?
Well, no. So now we have the women's health case, and I think this is instructive a little bit for the women's health case that's coming up, and that's a little bit bigger of a case coming up March 2nd. The Supreme Court will hear, and in that case, they are trying to they're trying to regulate the abortion clinics to have standards that are very similar to a hospital standards.
Right. So they, in this case being the state of Texas, want to impose all of these regulations on that the doctor has to have like hospital privileges within 30 miles, and that the facilities themselves have to live up to certain specifications, like the doorways and things, which if there was an actual connection to the safety and health of, the woman or there any connection to health, I could understand it.
Which I think that they may have a viable argument there because other facilities that don't deal with abortion actually adhere to these things.
But
those certain specifications.
But as far as I know, I think the specifications were for large hospitals. Okay. And so I think they knew going in that this would be a very arduous task for a smaller clinic. Yep. And I think it's shown by the numbers that have already, they went from 40 to 19.
I think this, and I'm not sure what all the specifications are. Yeah. Personally, and there goes those personal views you talked about, right? So personally, I think I'm okay with the specifications, barring that some of them are outrageous. But when you start talking about the 30 miles for the doctors, I think now you have a huge problem. And that's where these people are having to go to different
30
states
miles
now.
Doesn't seem all that far, or doesn't seem like that's too far. But like the state of Texas is like 800 miles long, and there aren't that many hospitals, even though it's like the second most populous state in the country. They're spread out, so it's some of this regulations can be sort of rationally related to health, which gives it a state interest, and I think it'll pass constitutional muster. But I think the specifications that are not rationally related to protecting the health of people are just going to get tossed out. But what's interesting to me about this issue is that it's such a hot topic issue still, and especially because we're in an election year. And I was like, how is it that this issue hasn't really changed when things like the perception of marijuana and gay marriage has completely flip-flopped over the last 30 years?
Yeah.
And
that's a result of stigma. Yeah, I think that's a result of stigma. I think when it comes to marijuana and gay marriage, there were stigmas around those things, but over time we had, medical marijuana and doctors coming out in support of it. And I think when it comes to gay marriage, you had a lot of people over the last 50, 60 years that were coming out of the closet. So it wasn't that it was another issue that wasn't relevant to you. You might have had a friend or a parent or, someone related to you that was gay. So it became a personal issue you could see and touch. And, whereas with abortions, people still haven't really talked about them. So you might have people in your life that have had abortions, you just don't know about it.
Yeah.
And so I think there's still a great stigma about it. And as long as that stigma persists, then the mindset won't really change.
Yeah, so it's very interesting that this issue has not moved at all in public perception, public opinion over the last 40 some odd years, and doesn't look like it's going to change. So we'll probably be
how
covering.
are you guys' sentiments on that? How do you guys feel like the court will rule?
I don't. It's not like I love abortion, but I do understand that if the government limits women's right to an abortion, like altogether, you can't do. We're going to have back alley abortions that are more dangerous to women. We're not going to make abortions go away.
Right.
I think what I would like to do is legislatively make it easier for women to get a hold of contraceptives, because then the number of abortions will go down. So I would like to see it go down.
What they're going to argue is that we aren't trying to do away with abortion at all. We're trying to enhance or protect women. Actually, that's what their argument is. That they're enhancing the way the process is done to make sure it's more safe for them. Now, I would argue. I think the Supreme Court, personally, I think the Supreme Court probably will not rule in favor of it, simply because it's this will come down to the undue burden test, and I think that it creates a huge and extreme undue burden for them to have to travel now, because what were the statistics? There were 42 hospitals or planned
clinics, and then once this came down, I believe it dramatically shifted to 19.
And then if this actually goes through, they said it would be like 7 or 11, right?
Yeah. So it's having definitely an impact. And this is really affecting a lot of minorities. Wealthy people will be able to go out of state. They'll be able to go out of their county. They'll be able to find.
Great point.
Yeah, and so it's really disproportionately affecting a class of people. And you've seen this before. You've seen. I mean, we'll go way back where it's like you can vote, but we have a poll tax. We can vote, but you have a literacy test. So are the regulations so overreaching that it's really a prescription for you can't do this at all?
Right. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see a lot more of these cases because this issue will not go away, for better or worse, will not go away. But I'm hoping it will not. It will sort of maybe dwindle down because it won't be that common if everybody has health care and is able to prevent pregnancy when they do not want to be pregnant. I think the interesting part about this is, like I say, well, let's allow everybody to have health care and free contraception, whatever. And then people were like, but who's going to pay for that? And then somebody says, the woman who wants the abortion was like, I want this abortion and I can't, afford this child. And the person's like, too bad. Right. And the woman's like, well, who's going to pay for this? Yeah. So having a child costs about $250,000. I think that's for a middle class child from ages 0 to 18, not including college. So I think the prevention is much cheaper, and I think that much smarter investment.
And I think when you talk about healthcare, I don't even think that's going to make much of a difference, because I think for a lot of the people that are pushing these undue burdens, even one abortion is too much. So I don't know if reducing the number makes people feel better about overregulating the industry.
Let's turn this around to guns. Yeah. Not going to try and take everybody's guns away, but can we just bring the numbers down? Like, is that not a compromise? Just like bring the numbers down of mass shootings and accidental shootings, that people hurting themselves.
But then even on that side, you're going to have people that want to overregulate because they still believe even one gun out there is too much. So, you're going to have.
This is my offer of compromise. I want to see fewer accidental shootings and mass shootings. So just let's regulate the guns a bit. Yeah. And then on the other side, the abortion people, I'll allow some regulation, but don't try and make it illegal for anybody to get it under any circumstances.
It's a heavily regulated industry. Like it is regulated quite well now. So it's
Which one?
The abortion industry.
And rightfully so. Yeah. Again, I'm pro abortion. But rightfully so, it should be regulated. It's a very dangerous process.
But this
and
is
it's
about
a procedure that, to me, I agree. I think this is definitely overreaching and an undue burden for sure.
Okay, so on to immigration, something we don't talk too much about on this show. But what's interesting is that the Supreme Court has said that it will rule on Obama's immigration policy this year before he leaves office. So they will be looking at the constitutionality of the executive orders that he issued. They're mainly about allowing people to stay here. If they've been here for a while, if they have children who are United States citizens, what some people like to call anchor babies. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think that they'll be constitutional, these executive orders?
Well, typically I would have said yes, but it seems that they're looking at the take care clause and whether or not the issuance of these executive orders somehow is an abdication of his executive duty.
What does that mean?
So whether or not he went so far that
Overstepped his boundaries.
exactly overstepped his boundaries, so that they are null and void, that he did not take care in proceeding the right way regarding this whole executive order. To me, this is a tough one. Whether or not they will stand muster, but the president he can regulate these things,
Right.
and he's regulated immigration before. Past presidents have, and so I don't see them failing. I do see Supreme Court upholding these executive orders, but
Yeah, I mean, this is a huge thing. Otherwise, there's going to be like mass deportations on like.
yeah. I personally have not seen the take care clause used to undo the constitutionality of anything. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays
that's
out.
That's a weird approach, actually.
BJ, you have any other thoughts on it?
I mean, I personally, I'm against it. I don't want to see the mass deportation of a number of people who actually do good in this country and actually provide various different aspects that our country could use. I mean, we need to grow in a number of ways, and our mental concepts. And I think when we add a number of different people from different nations, and I think that we're targeting specific people because of certain incidents here, and I don't think it's fair, honestly.
Yeah, and I always will go back to the fact that, yes, I understand you think they got here illegally, but we as a country,
Yes.
the United States, did a lot of wrong and illegal things that destroyed much of Central America, the infrastructure and all. I mean, just set them way, way, way back so that we made their choices, options, economic possibilities in life very limited, so much so that they were willing to risk their life to come over here to work, not
But,
come.
and like you said, I mean, one of the things that I do when I talk to my friends who are Americans, European Americans, and I just remind them, your ancestors came here illegally also.
It's true.
It's just the truth.
So it'll be something that we're going to pay careful attention to, because when the Supreme Court comes down with the decision on whether these executive orders were constitutional, it will have a massive impact on people right away.
Yeah.
All right, so then a more, I guess, in light of everything we've been talking about, a lighter story, but that people are taking very seriously, and that is the lack of diversity in the Oscar nominations. And we're like, maybe we should do some sort of affirmative action or something to help them out.
Well, how can justice be served?
Right. What would, there's a lot of people saying that they're going to, well, I don't know if I could say a lot of
Boycott or-
people.
But there have been
there's
some
some
prominent people. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think the big thing with this issue, with this topic is, and what I've seen, is a lot of people are just kind of looking at it like, what can be done? Something has to happen. This has to be illegal, or like, how is this possible, right? And I think that's where it kind of catches our eye, and we had this conversation. Like you said, what is a step? Can we apply affirmative action? And clearly, from a legal standpoint, we know that we can't actually do that.
Not from the government. Like the
Not from the
government, the
government.
state can't come in and say, all right, Hollywood, you got to start applying it. But
Right.
And let's just start with saying that there were no nominees for the last 2 years. So of color, and you're talking about 20 different categories.
And you're talking
And
about
so-
great movies, great actors.
Yeah,
as well.
we had Michael B. Jordan in Creed, Benicio del Toro. This year there were no Hispanics either. So we had some great performances, but there was no representation. And I know the Academy came out and kind of apologized and said, we are doing our best to change up our membership, which is for the majority
it's like 90%
older,
white and 80%
males.
male,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And
So what do you think if they were to institute, like within their own organization, they would say some, affirmative action type policy and said like 20% of the nominees, not in every category, but just 20% should be a minority. Would you think that would be helpful and lead us to sense of justice in this?
I forget what the statement
situation.
that was released was, But essentially, that's what they're doing, actually. I mean, they're not giving a percentage, but when you make a statement saying that we apologize and we're going to make sure we make a change to that, that's essentially what you're doing.
Well,
you're just not putting in black and white detail.
I would be willing to take a bet that things look the same the next year.
I would too. But I'm just saying that's what you're saying.
But if they did an actual policy, then there would be some numbers that you can actually look to and hold accountable.
Well, when you talk about hold accountable, again, because this is not being done by the government, this is an internal process.
They
and
could
an
say that
internal
about
policy.
themselves.
Yeah, but you self-regulating. So if you don't want to do it, you're not going to do it.
Well, the president, she is black, but it's just a membership that votes on these, and so. But I think that kind of self-regulation would be harmful in the situation. I think people would look at these as quotas, and people just do not look at those favorably. And then it becomes you were nominated because of this.
Exactly.
And so
that's the only reason. And some people, to be honest, some people might not even want to accept that award.
Yeah.
You know?
And so now they're talking about really trying to have the membership reflect the industry more so.
I think that's what makes the most sense.
And so whether or not they actually do it, we'll see.
I say nobody watch it, nobody attend, everybody just do away with it. Let it collapse and start a new one. That needs to be our approach with everything. That needs to be we got to do away with these systems completely.
And I think that is how you serve.
Approach.
That's how you serve justice. In this case, is through a boycott. When you boycott and you affect people's numbers, viewership goes down, advertisers are unhappy.
Money goes down. You've got to hit him in
Then
the
he was getting there. I was waiting for it. He was getting to the money.
So all of a sudden, people then start to go, okay, now we have to do something about this.
So the justice is really provided by the viewers or the lack of viewers who support.
And the worst, it really affects minorities in such a bad way because, the Oscars have done this with a lot of people of different color, where they kind of give you the Oscar that you should have won a couple of years ago, but not, and they've done it with several different actors, white, black, whatever, but now you have a host of, I think, actors of color that are now waiting in a queue. And now, if they win an Oscar for some performance that's not great, that they're kind of, it doesn't look good for the industry as a whole either. So, hopefully, they rectify it soon, and they're able to give those guys their due.
Last, there's no legal consequence to this. But what do you think Chris Rock should do? He's being asked to step down as host, and
I think it's a very difficult job for Chris Rock as a black person because he's a comedian. So you have to make light of the situation. You have to make a joke about it. But how can you make a joke about it when it's so present, it's so real, and it's affecting you?
Sometimes you have to just embrace reality. And I think a lot of these people get on this platform. I'm talking about athletes because that's the same. The question that's posed to Chris Rock is the same questions that was posed to the Clippers basketball player when Donald Sterling, who unfortunately is an alumni for our law school.
We don't have to tell the people that.
Right? I probably shouldn't have said that. That's true. But that's the same question that was posed. Should you go out and do your job? No. I think not. I think at this point, you make a statement and you say, I'm standing for something. You can get up there and you can make it funny and make a joke about it and actually bring awareness to it. We've done that for decades. Put it into it. Stop. Say, I'm not taking it anymore. I'm done.
Yeah, I think, it's a tough, at least with the Clippers, they're just playing basketball. They don't have to speak.
But they could have not played basketball, and what would the arena have done?
Oh, yeah.
I wouldn't have went to the Clipper game. I would have been upset.
Of course.
They could have shut it down.
But I think... But playing didn't hurt them. I think him hosting the Oscars might hurt him, just because he's got to be perfect. He's got to be perfect in a way that I can imagine him being.
I'm not sure how it would hurt him.
Okay.
Lose the respect of a lot of people.
People are going to say
Chris Rock has the vast majority of his fan base is actually white.
But I might say people will say you didn't say enough, you didn't do enough, or if he goes crazy, they might say you did too much. We're done with you.
Yeah, that's right.
So how do you walk this middle line of such a very serious issue that affects you, and people are watching you for this issue? Everyone's gonna be glued to the Oscars to see how he handles this. Forget the winners. Let's see how Chris Rock is handling this this issue.
That's true.
All right. Thanks for being with us today at Justice is Served. I am Chelsea Galicia. We have
DJ Abron
and Shaka Smith.
Yes.
And we will be back here next week with another episode of Justice is Served. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
From executives Kevin Undergaro, Dario Kristen, Tiana Hobson, and the entire BHL staff, we would like to thank you for supporting Black Hollywood Live, the first online broadcast network dedicated to African American entertainment. For questions and comments, contact us. info@blackhollywoodlive.com. Like us on Facebook, tweet us, or Instagram us at BHL Online. And I am the official voice of Black Hollywood Live, Scipio. Instagram me at KingXOBay. Thanks for tuning in.
Hollywood redefined.
The views expressed here are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of BHL or its owners or principals.